In our last episode, we explored an idea shared by many spiritual traditions throughout history, namely that the human being may be far more than a physical organism, that beneath and indeed beyond our flesh and bones, there may exist a subtle structure, not visible to our ordinary senses, yet perhaps just as real. And if that is true, then we are no longer simply biological machines. Something else adds up to our being, something that is transcending matter and that we have defined as the subtle energy structure of the human being. This subtle structure is very complex and is fully capable of entering into occult resonance on multiple vibration frequencies simultaneously. But resonance always requires two aspects: a resonator and something to resonate with. We've spent the last few episodes exploring the resonator. Today, we ask the obvious next question: resonating with what? What if throughout history humanity has been attempting to describe not just one world, but many subtle ones? Different layers of existence, different dimensions of subtle experience, different levels of reality, not merely imagined by one religion or one civilization, but appearing again and again under very different skies. Let's take a moment and think about it. Ancient India spoke of multiple lokas or worlds. Buddhist traditions describe various realms of existence. Christian mystics wrote of heavens, hells, and spiritual worlds, all abundantly populated by subtle beings. Jewish mysticism speaks of 4 worlds. Islam describes multiple heavens. Neoplatonic philosophers envisioned a hierarchy of reality. Even outside formal religion, countless people throughout history have claimed extraordinary experiences, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, profound mystical states, visions, encounters they believed took place beyond the physical world. Different languages, separate cultural spaces, different centuries, even different millennia. However, humanity keeps returning to a very similar idea, namely that reality may be far richer than it first appears for the ordinary senses. Now, none of this proves that these maps are all objectively correct. People can reach similar ideas for many reasons, but the convergence itself raises an important question. What if all these traditions, rather than inventing completely different universes, were attempting to describe different regions of the same landscape? That possibility has preoccupied and indeed fascinated humanity for thousands of years. And today, I'd like to invite you on a journey, or rather, an exploration of a map. An exploration of certain particular ways in which civilizations across history have understood reality, and to ask ourselves whether they may have been pointing toward something we have largely forgotten. So, where does our journey begin? Well, of course, with the invisible world said to exist closest to our own, a realm that many traditions describe as interwoven with the physical world itself, and they called it the Etheric World. So, thinking about it, this is kind of difficult to explain. How is it that civilizations separated by oceans, by languages, and by thousands of years kept telling stories about an unseen world woven into nature? The ancient Greeks spoke of the dryads inhabiting trees, naiads dwelling in rivers and springs, mountain nymphs and sea nymphs. The Celtic tradition mentioned the mysterious She, a hidden people living alongside our own world. Norse mythology described elves, dwarves, land spirits, and other unseen beings inhabiting forests, mountains, and hidden places. Slavic folklore tells of forest spirits, water spirits, and household guardians. Romanian tradition remembers the mysterious Yele, along with other beings associated with forests, crossroads, and lonely places. Japanese folklore speaks of the Kodama, spirits believed to inhabit ancient trees. Stories of mermaids and water spirits appear in cultures separated by vast distances. Indigenous traditions throughout the Americas, Africa, and Australia also described unseen intelligences intimately connected with the natural world. If we examine each tradition on its own, they simply look like myths. But take a step back, and a different picture begins to emerge. Separated by continents, humanity kept searching what looks like the same invisible landscape. The stories don't stop with unseen beings. They also speak of places people believed were somehow different. Stonehenge, Mount Kailash, Delphi, Uluru, ancient sacred groves, pilgrimage sites visited for thousands of years. Generation after generation, people crossed mountains, deserts, and oceans to reach them. Some returned saying they felt renewed. Others spoke of unusual clarity or of a silence unlike any they had experienced before. Whatever the explanation, one thing is undeniable. Human beings have long behaved as though certain places were not quite like the rest. Some traditions go even further. They speak not only of sacred places, but of entire hidden realms. The Tibetan tradition speaks of Shambhala. Celtic legend remembers Avalon. Irish mythology tells of Tir na Nog. Greek tradition speaks of the Isles of the Blessed. Some esoteric traditions describe Agartha, a hidden kingdom beyond ordinary perception. They are different stories in quite different cultures, yet the same underlying idea keeps coming back, that another world exists alongside our own. Some traditions even describe rare journeys into such places. Whether understood literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between, the image keeps resurfacing. So, what is going on here? Are these simply stories born from the human imagination? Is there some universal psychological impulse behind them? Or were different civilizations, each using its own symbols and language, trying to describe something they genuinely believed they had encountered objectively? It's possible that nobody can quite answer that question with complete certainty, but I do think it's a question worth asking. Because if there really is a level of reality more subtle than the physical, then perhaps all these traditions were pointing, however imperfectly, towards the same frontier. Many spiritual traditions give that frontier a name, the Etheric World. And if such a world exists, then it would be the natural bridge between the physical universe and everything that lies beyond. So that's where our journey begins. Now, if the etheric world is closely connected with life itself, the next level described by countless spiritual traditions is closely connected with something every one of us experiences every single day: our inner world. Think about it for a moment. Have you ever noticed how the same place can feel completely different depending on your inner state? One day you walk through a park and everything feels alive. The colors seem brighter. People seem friendlier. The air itself feels lighter. And then, perhaps after receiving some terrible news, you walk through that very same park. Nothing outside has changed, but everything feels different. The world itself seems darker, heavier, almost as if you're living in a completely different reality. We've all experienced moments like these, moments of profound joy, deep grief, intense love, crippling fear, or overwhelming peace. Modern psychology studies these as emotional states. Neuroscience studies the corresponding activity of the brain. Both perspectives have brought valuable insights. But for thousands of years, many spiritual traditions proposed that these experiences might also reveal something deeper. They suggested that our emotions are not merely private psychological events, but expressions of our resonance with a subtler dimension of reality, a dimension traditionally called the Astral World. Now, before you imagine ghosts, fantasy stories, or Hollywood movies, let's approach this the same way we've approached everything else in this series. Not by presenting a dogma, but by asking a simple question. If cultures separated by continents, languages, and thousands of years repeatedly described strikingly similar landscapes of inner experience, could they have all been pointing toward something real? Let's explore that possibility together. We've all heard people saying things like, "I'm living in hell." Usually, we treat it as a figure of speech. But what if this isn't only a metaphor? Think about the moments in your own life when you've experienced overwhelming hatred, crippling jealousy, despair, or uncontrollable rage. Those states don't simply change what you feel. They change how you perceive reality itself. Your judgment becomes clouded. Beauty becomes difficult to notice. Compassion or love seems almost impossible in those moments. Everything narrows down. Everything becomes darker. Throughout history, countless spiritual traditions have suggested that these states are not merely psychological. They are also forms of occult resonance. According to this perspective, when a human being consistently cultivates destructive emotions and attitudes, they gradually begin to resonate with corresponding lower regions from the astral world. This idea appears in many forms. Christianity speaks of hell. Buddhism describes various hellish realms. Hindu traditions describe narakas. Other cultures tell similar stories using different languages and symbols. Although their descriptions differ, they often point toward the same underlying intuition or perception, that consciousness can become progressively imprisoned by the very states, lower states, it repeatedly cultivates. Within the framework we've been building throughout this series, this becomes surprisingly coherent. If resonance is a universal principle, then the states we nurture within ourselves are not spiritually neutral. Just as a radio can only receive the station to which it is tuned, our inner state determines the kinds of realities with which we gradually come into occult resonance. Seen from this perspective, hell is not merely a place of punishment imposed from the outside. It is first and foremost a state of consciousness, a progressive separation from truth, from love, from beauty, and ultimately from God. Whether that condition continues beyond physical death is a question that various traditions answer in various ways, but they agree on something profoundly practical. The road toward hell does not begin after death. It begins with the choices we make, the habits we cultivate, the states of being we repeatedly choose to nourish today, here and now. And throughout history, some people have gone even further. Across cultures and across centuries, we repeatedly encounter stories of men and women who deliberately sought contact with dark spiritual forces, who believed they could obtain power, wealth, knowledge, or influence through what has traditionally been called a pact with the devil. Is this merely mythology, a psychological projection, or could there be a deeper reality behind one of humanity's oldest recurring ideas? We will explore that question in a future episode on this channel. Fortunately, the story doesn't end there with hells. Just as countless traditions speak of states of profound darkness, they also speak of states of extraordinary light. Again, let's begin with something familiar. Have you ever met someone whose mere presence brought you peace? Someone who seemed to radiate kindness, wisdom, or quiet strength, without saying very much at all. Or perhaps you've experienced moments of such overwhelming love, gratitude, beauty, or inner silence that words seemed almost incapable of describing them. Many people dismiss these experiences as just emotions. Yet throughout history, spiritual traditions have consistently suggested something much deeper. They proposed that just as destructive states can draw our consciousness toward darker regions of reality, through occult resonance, of course, states such as love, compassion, purity, wisdom, joy, and sincere aspiration toward God gradually bring us into resonance with higher regions of the astral world. Christianity speaks of paradise. Buddhism describes heavenly realms. Hindu traditions describe various celestial worlds or lokas, populated by countless godly, godlike, or divine celestial beings. Many other traditions tell the same story using different names. The descriptions are not identical, but the underlying intuition is surprisingly consistent. Consciousness naturally moves toward that with which it resonates. Within the framework we've been building throughout this series, this follows the same principle we've already encountered and explained. If resonance is universal, then every sincere act of kindness every moment of genuine forgiveness, every effort to seek the truth, every aspiration towards beauty is more than a moral choice. It is also a firm spiritual orientation, a gradual attunement through occult resonance to realities that elevate, illuminate, and expand our consciousness. Seen from this perspective, heaven is not merely a destination awaiting us after death. It begins whenever our inner life comes into harmony with truth, with beauty, with love, and ultimately with God. And perhaps this explains why, throughout history, saints, sages, and great spiritual masters have so often shared the same quiet belief. Heaven is not only somewhere we hope to reach someday, it is also something we begin to participate in, or we resonate with, here and now. And if all of this sounds like nothing more than beautiful symbolism, there is another question worth asking. Are there experiences that might suggest these realities are more than metaphors? Take dreams, for example. Most of our dreams are probably little more than the mind, or the ordinary mind, processing memories, emotions, and daily experiences. But in the course of history, there have also been reports of another kind of dreams. Dreams in which people later claimed to have met one another, recognized each other, and then independently confirmed details of the same encounter the following day. If even a small number of such reports were genuine, they would raise an intriguing question and possibility also. Could some dreams represent temporary experiences of subtler dimensions of reality? The same question naturally arises from another phenomenon that has attracted increasing attention over the past decades: near-death experiences. Thousands of people from different cultures have described encounters that completely transformed their understanding of life. Some speak of overwhelming love, light, peace, and an indescribable sense of coming home. Others describe profoundly disturbing experiences that resemble what many traditions have long called hell. Their interpretations differ. Their religious beliefs also differ, yet certain recurring patterns continue to appear with surprising consistency. Of course, none of these experiences, taken by itself, constitute definitive proof. They deserve careful investigation, thoughtful skepticism, and an open consciousness. But together, they invite a question that becomes increasingly difficult to ignore. Could humanity's oldest spiritual traditions, the testimony of countless individuals, and the framework we've been exploring throughout this series all be pointing toward the same hidden dimension of reality? Whether you ultimately answer yes or no, I hope this journey has encouraged you to ask the question with fresh eyes. Because perhaps the greatest discovery is not that these invisible worlds may indeed exist, but that the way we choose to live, to think, to love, and to aspire may already be deciding the world with which we predominantly resonate, both now and beyond. Now, if the etheric world is closely associated with life, with what people have called bioenergy, and the astral world with our emotional and affective life, certain spiritual traditions describe yet another level of reality, one that is much more difficult to put into words. A realm that is not made of sensations or emotions or feelings for that matter, but of archetypal ideas. To be more precise, the archetypal ideas of God that serve as the root causes of everything that exists in His creation and manifestation. Ideas that spring forth from His very being and are therefore very intimately connected to it, even almost undistinguishably merged with it. Within the causal realm, we have access to the ultimate blueprints of creation, the causes that make everything tick, be, and exist exactly the way it does. Here we can find and we can enter into occult resonance with the primordial intentions of God, and therefore discover them by mirroring them in our inner universe. Also here we find the perfect archetypes of all the human virtues or qualities, or the godly attributes that we introduced in episode 4 on this channel, as omnipresent fields of energy that each have a distinct vibration frequency that never changes. This is a realm of supreme principles, archetypes, and force ideas that profoundly influence and shape the whole of creation on all its levels. The quality and vibration frequency of the many energies that permeate and exist in the causal realm is vastly superior to those of the astral plane. And in this respect, one of the most beautiful modern descriptions comes from Paramahansa Yogananda. In Autobiography of a Yogi, he recounts an extraordinary experience in which his guru, Sri Yukteswar, describes the causal world as a realm of extraordinary subtlety, a reality in which creation appears not as solid matter, emotion, or feeling, but it appears as force ideas. Herein, consciousness experiences an astonishing freedom beyond the limitations of the physical and astral planes. Here is a brief quote from Sri Yukteswar's revelations. Causal desires are fulfilled by perception only. The nearly free beings who are encased only in the causal body see the whole universe as realizations of the dream ideas of God. They can materialize anything and everything in sheer thought. Causal beings, therefore, consider the enjoyment of physical sensations or astral delights as gross and suffocating to the soul's fine sensibilities. Causal beings work out their desires by materializing them instantly. Those who find themselves covered only by the delicate veil of the causal body can bring universes into manifestation even as the creator. Because all creation is made of the cosmic dream texture, the soul, thinly clothed in the causal, has vast realizations of power. Whether one understands this account literally, symbolically, or somewhere in between, it invites us to contemplate a profound possibility. What if the visible world and even the invisible worlds we've explored so far are themselves expressions of deeper causes, deeper principles? Within the framework we've been building throughout this series, this possibility is very coherent. The physical world expresses the etheric. The etheric supports life. The astral gives shape to our complex and multifaceted inner experience. And the causal points toward the level where overarching patterns, universal laws, ultimate meanings, perennial truths, and archetypes themselves originate. If we accept that such a realm truly exists, imagination falls very short of providing a picture of what the beings inhabiting this realm might look like. In fact, some traditions describe it as a formless realm, or arupa in Sanskrit, thereby rendering our regular sensory-based representations of what a causal being might be like completely irrelevant. Looking at all these in retrospect, we can understand why the greatest spiritual traditions have always insisted that the most profound transformation of the human being takes place by transforming the causes from which our lives unfold and are derived. And all of these can be accessed and influenced through occult resonance at the level of the causal body. More on this fascinating topic and how all these work together through the law of occult resonance in future episodes on this channel. So, even after exploring the physical, the etheric, the astral, and the causal world, we have not yet reached the ultimate mystery. Because throughout history, the greatest spiritual traditions and religions have pointed beyond even these. They remind us that God is not simply another being inhabiting the highest level of reality, nor merely the greatest intelligence within the universe. God is understood as the very source from which all levels of existence arise, the one in whom they are sustained, and the one toward whom they ultimately return. He is also the one that, after creating his entire creation and manifestation, remains deeply fused, merged with it, permeating the entirety of the macrocosm. If we accept that this vision is true, then the macrocosm is far richer than our senses alone can perceive. It is a living reality, ordered, meaningful, and profoundly interconnected. A reality in which every thought, every choice, every aspiration, every act of love gradually shapes not only who become, but also the reality with which we come into resonance. Perhaps that is why the world's great spiritual traditions have always invited us to seek something greater than knowledge alone, not merely to understand reality, but to participate consciously in it, to discover that beneath the visible world, beneath our emotions, beneath even the deepest archetypes, there is a presence, closer to us than our own breath, yet greater than the entire macrocosm that it continuously embraces with endless love. And perhaps the greatest journey is not the exploration of invisible worlds. It is the gradual discovery of the one from whom they all arise and eventually return to. As fascinating as these invisible dimensions may be, the most important question is not whether they exist, but what they mean for our everyday lives. Because if reality truly extends far beyond what our physical senses can perceive, if our thoughts, emotions, and aspirations continuously place us in resonance with different levels of existence, then resonance, or occult resonance, is no longer just an interesting spiritual idea. It becomes one of the most practical principles we could ever discover. It influences the way we think, the people we're drawn to, the choices we make, the habits we cultivate, and ultimately the person we become and the quality of the life we build for ourselves. So in our next episode, we will bring everything together. We'll discover why the law of occult resonance matters, how it quietly shapes our lives every single day, and most importantly, how we can consciously transform our own predominant resonance. Because understanding reality is only the beginning. Learning to live in harmony with it is where the real journey begins. And until next time, let us all keep seeking the truth, keep cultivating love, and never stop asking the deepest questions.